Welcome back to Les Schwab Tire Center's Outdoor GPS, presented by Fisherman's Marine and Outdoor. Now it's time for your weekend tech tip, brought to you by Chevy Silverado.
Your Chevy Silverado tech tip of the week? Well, we're going to spin it with Chris Fotopoulos. If I didn't, I would be doing us all an injustice. Okay, so let's pick up where we left off there. Herring, obviously, maybe not obviously, but for the 90% of us, herring, early season in particular, all through March, first week of April, herring is probably the go-to for everyone if you can if you have good bait. Now, if you don't get good bait, maybe you go someplace, you buy some out of a freezer or whatever the heck it is, and it's just not that great. If you run across that, what would be some of your advice to try to make that bait better than what it is that you initially opened it up with?
Well, I think you can take an average quality bait and turn it into a better bait by brining it.
Okay.
And I use this stuff right here. My program is I use fresh bait mostly.
Sure.
Thawed out, cut, fish that day. The bait that doesn't get used, the leftover bait, goes in a brine, and I can use that the next day.
Gotcha.
And with lots of confidence.
Gotcha.
And so I think you can take an average bait and make it a pretty good bait by throwing some scent and some brine and stuff on there.
Okay, well, as you saw there on that Kershaw Tech, perfect timing, Kershaw Tech Cam, bad bait comes out of the package, thawed out, you open it, would you brine it right away sometimes?
If I knew that if I didn't have the confidence in my bait that I just thawed out, I would brine it.
Okay.
Absolutely, yes.
In a perfect world, when you've got good bait and you open that thing up, are you a brine then fish guy, or would you prefer to fish it right out of the package?
I kind of do both. Every day I have brined bait and fresh thawed bait with me. And I like to start out with the fresh thawed. As the day goes by, and if I'm not feeling like I'm getting bit very well with one or the other, I'll switch more to the other.
Okay.
And just let the fish tell you what they want, as Buzz Ramsey always says. You
Sure.
know? And if they're biting one better than the other, work on that one. You're doing something right.
But to start the day, you're taking a fresh pack, cutting it open, and using just
That's how
fresh
I
bait
start the day.
right out of there.
Yep.
Cut plug always, sometimes whole?
Sometimes whole, especially with real small baits. Red labels fish well whole. And don't ignore the heads too. You know, the plastic heads that we use to put a toothpick in, an anchovy head. You can put a small herring in there too and do really well with those. And there's actually some that are designed for using with a herring versus an anchovy.
Gotcha.
And then the anchovy. The anchovy's a great spinner bait too.
Sure.
And you can buy frozen anchovies this time of year and brine them up in this same brine here, put them in a head and do well with them.
Do you ever add Procure products? I mean, is it something that you would say, you know, let's throw some bloody tuna in there on a bait that's already cut, maybe just to add a little fresh stink to it, something? Is that something you do, or would you prefer just to leave those baits naked and just fish them?
Well, this is the basis of my brine right here.
Okay.
I throw some other things in there, whether it be anise or some bloody tuna or whatever. That's kind of a day-to-day thing. Or if I hear something from somebody who's working well, I may try that the next day in my brine. Or maybe I'll have two brines with me.
Sure.
As well as different colors too. The colors I use in the spring are this kind of natural bluish look too, which you get a great color out of. But chartreuse is another good one, especially if you have some murky water.
Sure.
Which some years, like last year, we did. Chartreuse seems to work really well. And get a real nice, bright chartreuse bait. Use a lot of that dye. Don't skimp on it.
Prior to the show, we were talking a little bit about baits, of course. Head on, head off. Are you a gut? I should say it differently. Excuse me, everyone. Guts in, guts out.
I do a little bit of both. I don't feel good about when I reel my bait in after cutting the head off and leaving the guts in, and I reel up to check it, and the guts are hanging out of it because it can affect the roll. And you may be fishing down there for 20 minutes, half an hour with a bait that's not rolling because the guts decided to come out.
Sure.
So I probably feel more confident with a bait with the guts out. You can kind of get to the point where you leave half the guts in and it stays in better.
Sure.
There's some things you can do to tinker with it to keep some guts in, because blood and guts is good.
Right.
And when you're fishing a fresh thawed out bait, to me, if you got a really good bait, fresh thawed out bait with some guts in there is number one.
Any tips that you could give for folks when they are removing the guts out of there? Anything that you might do that would be different from another, like a big vent hole, small vent hole? Is there anything that you do that might help improve? Barring, of course, hook placement, which is everything. But is there anything that you might do that might help?
Your vent hole is a critical deal. I think if you do too big of a vent hole, you you can actually make your bait so it doesn't spin as well. So be careful with that. Definitely cut a vent hole. I like a vent hole. If you don't cut a vent hole, you risk blowing your bait out real quickly too.
Right. Having
your bait somewhat streamlined and hydrodynamic is important so that it keeps on fishing and keeps on spinning and doesn't mushroom out.
Sure.
And when you do cut a vent hole, you allow some of the water to flow into that cavity, pick up some scent from the bloodline, which is the kidney,
sure.
and any leftover guts to blow out the back, and that's just more scent in the water, and that's all good too.
Okay, makes sense. Everybody's got their own theory on what a spin should look like. Are you a drill bit kind of guy, tail out more so than the head? Obviously, I'm not gonna. I'll say this because there's a lot of folks that are like, I like to see the head spin out. No, just stop with that. So, what do you like to see?
I like a pretty tight spin, and that's what I'm trying to achieve is a pretty tight spin. But you know, I don't use a plug cutter most of the time. Some years I do, some years I don't. So I get a little bit of inconsistency in my baits oftentimes. And if I get one that's got a little more wobble to it, that doesn't scare me away. Now, tail wobble is what we really don't want. So if you got one that's helicoptering out with its tail, do something different. Get rid of it, rehook it, do something so that tail isn't just, like I said, helicoptering.
Sure.
But if you got a little wobble to your bait, that isn't necessarily a bad thing. But you know, at least somebody who has a lot of experience fishing herring, when you throw a bait in and it spins really nice and has that just perfect kind of wobble and tight spin, you see it in the water and you know that's the one that catches.
Right.
And then sure enough, that's the one that goes down right away.
Right.
So that happens sometimes.
It's a good feeling. Unfortunately, it's one of those feelings that I have a hard. I'm one of those guys. If I don't get I don't even mess with it. If I don't get the right spin, I yard the bait. I cut another one and I put it on. I'm not willing to do different multiple hook placements because that in turn will help out with blowing your baits out, especially if they're fresh right out of the package. Okay, last question. I know I got to cut to a break. When you're tying your mooching rigs, okay, and I'm not going to ask anything specific about sliding or fixed or whatever. Everybody's got their own take on that. With this time of year, these fish that we catch using green label and red label, what hooks do you like? Do you like a 2-aught, 3-aught, 3-aught, 4-aught, 4-aught, 3-aught? What's your combo that you like with your mooching rigs?
Well, let's just talk about a green label. That's the most common size used. I do a 3-aught. I do a 3-hook rig. And, as you can see on my rod.
Yeah, we'll have that this upcoming segment.
And I like a 3-aught top, a 4-aught middle, and a 3-aught bottom.
Oh.
And the whole thing is about 5 inches. The whole from eye to hook to eye to hook is about 5 inches long. I like a hook hanging way back there.
Okay, I got you. All fixed.
All fixed.
There you go. That's your Chevy Silverado Tech Tip of the Week, and I'm going to tell you right now, that's a lot. Thank goodness for technology. Rewind, record. I don't care. I mean, some of the tips that you just got there, these are little things that will literally make you better at catching spring Chinook, because they're one of, if not the most frustrating species of salmon that we target is a springer. And that's because of conditions, different water, temperature, all these things. But if you can narrow it down and eliminate some of these little things, you can be more successful. All right, we're gonna be back in just a couple of minutes. I'm gonna grab his rod that he's got over here. We'll even show you that 3-hook setup. Is that okay? And the flasher that he started so much stuff with the last couple of years as well. So don't go anywhere. We'll be back with Chris Bertopoulos in just a minute.
Outdoor GPS is brought to you by Yakima Bait, steeped in tradition, innovation, and fishing success. And by Procure Bait Sense, ruthlessly effective.